Long ago, in the village of Omoagwo, where the sun never set at night and the moon was but a distant memory, lived a man named ejiofor. He was blind, but his sightless eyes had once beheld something no man should see, the goddess Udi. During a sacred hour, according to legend, only women were allowed to see her, and any woman who did would become fertile. But if a man dared to lay eyes upon her, he would be struck blind. One day, ejiofor, forgetting the sacred day of Udi, stumbled upon the goddess bathing in the river. Realizing his mistake, he hurried home, but it was too late. He had become blind. Since then, Omoagwo had not seen the moon, and the villagers lived in perpetual darkness, fearing the wrath of the gods. Ejiofor had a son named Uchenna, who grew up hearing of his father's misfortune and the importance of pleasing the gods. Unlike his father, Uchenna avoided fights and sought to maintain peace in the village. But ejiofor, concerned that his son lacked his love for battle, summoned him one day to pass on his legacy of defending Omoagwo. However, Uchenna, believing in the power of peace, was hesitant to embrace his father's wishes. Unaware of the danger looming on the horizon, he remained oblivious to the winds of change that would soon alter his life forever. As Uchenna sat peacefully on a tree trunk, a snake suddenly fell from the tree and slithered toward him, poised to attack. Terrified, Uchenna screamed and ran away without confronting the snake. Hearing his son's cry, ejiofor rushed outside to see what had happened. Concerned, he asked Uchenna what had caused him to scream, not realizing that the boy had already fled in fear. "What's wrong, Uchenna?" ejiofor inquired, scanning the area for any sign of his son. Uchenna, still trembling from the encounter with the snake, explained what had happened to his father. But instead of offering comfort, ejiofor scolded him for his cowardice, disappointed that his son had not faced the snake bravely. Frustrated by Uchenna's perceived weakness, ejiofor called for his wife Ifeoma to join them. When Ifeoma arrived, ejiofor expressed his disappointment in his son, declaring him unfit to carry on his legacy. Ifeoma, however, tried to reassure Uchenna, wiping away his tears and comforting him. She reminded ejiofor that Uchenna was still just a child and needed time to grow into a man. But ejiofor remained unconvinced, insisting that Uchenna should be more like him, strong and fearless. As the days passed, it was time for the village to select warriors for an upcoming wrestling match with a neighboring village. Despite the opposition from some of the villagers, Uchenna was chosen to represent Omoagwo in the children's category, based on his father's reputation as a skilled wrestler. Excited by the news, ejiofor encouraged Uchenna to prove himself in the wrestling contest, hoping that it would be the moment his son finally stepped into his father's shoes. Uchenna, though nervous, accepted the challenge to please his father and prepare for the upcoming festival. Filled with anticipation and determination, Uchenna's heart raced as he prepared to face his fears and prove his worth on the wrestling mat. With the festival approaching, everyone in the village was busy getting ready. The maidens, dressed in their best beads, talked excitedly about finding suitors. They each had ideas about how to catch someone's eyes. Meanwhile, Uchenna, unlike the other kids who were training for the festival, didn't want to join in. He felt scared and didn't like being around the other children. Instead, he went to the bush to be alone with the animals he liked. Uchenna admired his father's hunting skills, but didn't like seeing animals getting hurt. Ejiofor, Uchenna's father, wanted his son to be tough like him, but Uchenna didn't want to fight. He believed in peace and wished for a world without wars. Uchenna knew that if he had these things out loud, his father would be very angry. As the festival drew closer, Uchenna felt more nervous. He hadn't trained like the other kids, and he worried his father would find out. When Uchenna tried to sneak past his father, ejiofor noticed his fear. He reminded Uchenna to be brave like a lion, but Uchenna felt anything but brave. Luckily, ejiofor didn't notice Uchenna's wet pants, and Uchenna quickly made an excuse to go inside. Inside the hut, Uchenna tried to hide from his father, hoping to avoid more questions. He felt relieved when his father talked about the festival and his favorite food, melon soup. The next day, Uchenna panicked when he saw Ejike, the youth leader, who had come to report his absence from training. Desperate to avoid trouble, Uchenna threatened Ejike with a knife. But Ejike wasn't scared and challenged Uchenna to prove he was brave. As the argument heated up, ejiofor heard the noise and came outside. Uchenna couldn't control his emotions anymore, and his secret was on the verge of being revealed. When ejiofor emerged from the hut, Uchenna panicked and stabbed Ejike with the knife to keep him quiet. Ejiofor screamed, then fell to the ground. Uchenna dropped the knife, realizing what he had done. Just as ejiofor asked what was happening, trembling, Uchenna confessed to killing someone. Ejiofor, unable to see, asked Uchenna to guide him to Ejike. Uchenna led his father to the injured man, and Uchenna suggested taking him to the village healer, but ejiofor insisted they get rid of the body to avoid trouble. Uchenna covered Ejike's body and dragged it to a nearby farm to make it seem like he died there. When he returned, stained with blood, Ejike tried to cheer him up, saying he was now a true son, but Uchenna felt like a demon had awoken inside him. Feeling guilty and lost, Uchenna confided in the animals in the bush. Feeling they understood him better than humans, he decided to stay in the bush, away from his father's expectations. Meanwhile, Ifeoma worried about her missing son, but ejiofor dismissed her concerns, believing Uchenna would return when he was ready. Ifeoma vowed to find him herself if he didn't come back by morning, troubled by his disappearance. As night fell, Ifeoma wondered why Uchenna hadn't returned. She decided to wait until morning before searching for him. Ifeoma still couldn't sleep as the thought of Uchenna filled her mind, keeping her awake until morning. Before the cock crowed, she got up to search for her son with a lantern. Where could he be? She asked, walking along the bush path that led nowhere. Despite feeling frightened, she persisted because she needed to ensure her son's safety. He was still a young boy and could hardly fend for himself. Ifeoma questioned everyone she encountered on the path about her son's whereabouts, but no one had an answer. Meanwhile, Uchenna had taken a different route back home. He noticed his father outside the compound with his walking stick. Quietly, he slipped into the hut without a word to his father to avoid questions about why he hadn't attended the festival. His main concern was his mother raising an alarm upon seeing him. Summoning courage, he entered the hut only to find it empty. Relieved, he drifted off to sleep as he couldn't rest in the uncomfortable bush surroundings. As he slept, he had a dream. "What are you doing here, Ejike?" "I thought I had killed you," Uchenna exclaimed, trembling with fear. "Soon, the whole village will know what you have done. Blood for blood, they say. You will also perish. You think I'm dead. I am not. You will regret your actions, Uchenna, and it will be too late to make amends." Ejike replied in a straightforward manner, dressed in his battle attire and showing a serious attitude. After thoroughly looking at Uchenna, he accused, "I sense fear. You are still a coward. That is why you avoided the festival. You know you can't fight. You are a coward, Uchenna." Ejike's word jolted Uchenna awake from his slumber. He got up and screamed, "I am not a coward. Stop disturbing me. I killed you. What do you want?" "Kill me too? Ejike, show yourself." It was more than just a dream. This scream attracted ejiofor, whom Uchenna did not want to see. He used his walking stick and found his way inside the hut. "Uchenna," he called. This made Uchenna shiver even more. He felt as if he was haunted. "Papa," he called and did not say anything else. "What are you doing here? We have been searching for you since yesterday. Where did you go?" Ejiofor asked, surprised as how his son entered the house without his knowledge. Uchenna could not even defend himself. He thought about telling his father about the dream, but it was useless saying it to him because he would not say anything that could help the situation. "That reminds me, is today not the wrestling festival? I thought you had been chosen. What are you still doing here? The people will be waiting for you. Oh, your mother had not slept because of you. That woman was disturbing me about your whereabouts, not knowing you can take care of yourself. She had even gone out in search of you before I woke up," he said in a soft tone. Just when he was still talking, Ifeoma came back very tired and sat on the stool in the hut, straightening her leg. "Oh, my leg," she screamed in pain. She had to take a deep breath before finally saying something to Uchenna. "Do you want to kill me before my time? Where have you been?" She stood up and hit him on his back. "I did not kill my mother. You will not be the cause of my untimely death," she yelled at him. Uchenna had gotten used to her way of nurturing, and he did not act like he was affected in any way. He had worse problems. Ifeoma was always complaining about everything, and she appeared weak to Uchenna and unable to take on any bad news. This made him not to confide in her. "Go and take your bath," ejiofor yelled at Uchenna, who seemed less concerned. In order to please his father and also prove to Ejike that he was not a coward, he went inside and took his bath to go to the village square for the wrestling festival. When he was done, his father held him by the arm and led the way to the village square. As his heart raced even faster, every step he took reminded him of the incident, and he could not even take his mind off it, no matter how he tried. When they all got there, ejiofor sat somewhere in the front with the elders and dragged his wife by the hand to sit with him. "Tell me every single thing that happens here. I want you to be my eyes today. I need to know every action Uchenna makes to track his opponent. I know my son will make me proud," he said to Ifeoma, who just replied, "Okay." She was lost in thought about her son. To her, she felt he almost ran away because he was forced to attend the festival, and she really pitied him. She could see in his eyes that he had no interest in the wrestling festival, even when he did not want to tell her. They had arrived at the right time, and the wrestling had not started when they got there. Unknown to them, everyone was waiting for the arrival of the head warrior whom Uchenna had killed. The whole village waited for the chief warrior to arrive, but no one heard or saw him. The elders started questioning themselves. Why would Ejike decide to disgrace us like this in front of the other village? They murmured. Then, the king made an announcement. "Good evening, everyone. The chief warrior seemed to be missing. We have sent the guards to search for him, but nobody knows where he is. The festival cannot happen today without the chief warrior," he said. At the mention of Ejike, Uchenna, who was standing nearby, almost fell to the ground. He was breathing heavily, and some of the boys noticed. "Are you okay, Uchenna?" one of them asked. Uchenna just nodded. Ejiofor, who was sitting a bit far from his son, knew that Uchenna would be scared. He felt relieved that the festival wouldn't happen for now. The people of Umuagwu murmured among themselves, sighing about the missing warrior. People from the neighboring village also murmured, saying, "It's good that Igwe didn't come to witness this day. How can a whole chief warrior be missing? What will happen to the whole village?" One of them laughed at the people of Umuagwu. The festival was dismissed, and as everyone went back to their houses, they had a lot to say. Uchenna was a bit excited that he wouldn't have to be part of the festival. He happily walked alongside his father, lost in his own thoughts. Ejiofor, knowing about the customs, asked, "I hope you threw the body into the forest." He asked his son, who had been acting deaf in order to avoid responding. Ejiofor asked the question again, but his son remained disconnected from his thoughts. "I threw him somewhere in his farm," he finally responded with a frown. It was all his father's fault. Trying to prove himself as a true son had cost him a lot. As tears dropped from his eyes, he thought about the dream he had. What if someone finds out? He asked himself, his heart racing faster than usual, making his father notice his heavy breathing. "Is that you breathing?" Ejiofor asked, unable to see, but hearing his son's breath. "I know you are scared that the villagers will find out you killed Ejike. What evidence do you have? You should act brave like your father and not breathe heavily from your mouth because of a little thing you did. I will support you. When you get home, don't act strange or start shaking, so your mother won't suspect anything odd about you." "You know, she will definitely be suspicious." Ejiofor tried to reassure him, making him feel a bit calmer. But for how long can the truth be hidden? The villagers will find out. It's best if I run away from this village before anyone discovers anything, he thought. But then, he had a second thought. If I run away when no one has found Ejike's body, they might suspect I did something to him because he came looking for me. He decided to wait until the situation calmed down before running away. Far from war and his father, he was lost in thought and didn't even realize he had passed the compound. Ejiofor had to call him back, saying, "What are you still thinking about? You have even forgotten the way to your father's house." Ejiofor scolded him. It seemed like Uchenna was not in his right senses. He quickly turned back to the compound and straight to the hut. Ifeoma was the first person to go back when she heard about the chief warrior and the postponement of the festival. She rushed home to sweep and prepare breakfast. She sighted Uchenna, and he just greeted her casually and went inside the hut without saying anything else, making her wonder what was going on with him. When she noticed Ejiofor coming closer with his walking step after Uchenna had walked past her to the hut, she asked him, "What's wrong with your son? I know he doesn't care if the festival holds or not, but is there anything else bothering him?" She asked her husband, who just sighed and went inside the hut while she followed him. Going inside the hut, she asked Ejiofor, who was standing, watched the direction Uchenna was sitting without saying a word. "What's going on in this house? Is there something I need to know?" she asked, this time very furious. She had had enough of their quietness. "Uchenna, what's going on in this house? Since when did you start hiding things from your mother? I understand you didn't want to take part in the festival, and now it's been postponed. Why did you see me outside and just greet me without even smiling?" She fired at Ejiofor, who sat with his arms folded, his eyes filled with tears. He didn't even know where to start from. He was dying inside and tired of pretending to anyone. He wished they wouldn't do anything to him so he could go straight to the village square and confess what had happened. He didn't want anyone to judge him or pity him at that point. He just wanted to let out his sorrow, and no one would say a word. He couldn't help himself. He had to say it. Mama, I killed Ejike. But he didn't even finish talking when Ifeoma let out a scream. You did what? She asked. And as he proceeded to speak again, she covered his mouth with her palms. Abomination! She screamed with teary eyes. Ifeoma's hand trembled as she removed them from Uchenna's mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief and horror. Abomination! She repeated, her voice barely a whisper this time, but filled with a weight that seemed to hang heavy in the air. Ejiofor remained seated, his arms still folded, but his eyes now brimming with tears that threatened to spill over. Uchenna felt the weight of his mother's reaction like a physical blow. He wanted to explain, to tell them why he had done what he did, but the words caught in his throat, suffocated by the enormity of his actions. Ifeoma's gaze turned from Uchenna to Ejiofor, her expression a mixture of anger, confusion and grief. How could you let this happen? She demanded, her voice rising with each word. Our own son, a murderer? Ejiofor's shoulders slumped under the weight of her accusation, and he buried his face in his hands, unable to meet her eyes. I didn't know, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I didn't know what he was capable of. The heart seemed to close in around them, suffocating in its silence as the reality of their situation sank in. Uchenna felt the weight of his mother's disappointment like a physical ache in his chest, and he wished with every fiber of his being that he could turn back time and undo what he had done. But there was no going back. The truth was out, and they were left to face the consequences. As Ifeoma's sobs filled the air, Uchenna knew that life as they knew it would never be the same again. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the village, the darkness seemed to settle in around them, a portent of the trials that lay ahead. Stop shouting, Ifeoma! Ejiofor scolded his wife, who was already crying and rolling on the floor, placing her hands on her head. She knew what would happen if a person committed such an atrocity, and the thought of her son being stoned to death overshadowed her. Nani, what are we going to do? Soon the whole village will find out about this, and our only son will be stoned to death, Ifeoma asked, already shivering, making Uchenna regret telling her anything. Shut up, woman, Ejiofor screamed. Stop putting more fear in this boy. Nobody will find out anything unless you take your sharp mouth to the village square and announce what your son has done. Ejiofor responded in anger, his fist folded. He never wanted his wife to find out about anything because she would scream at the top of her voice and make a scene, attracting passerby. I specifically asked you not to tell your mother anything, no matter what. Ejiofor turned to face Uchenna, who bowed his head and cried. His father usually says, be a man and don't let a woman see you cry. That's exactly what he was doing, but he felt relieved by sharing his secret with his mother. Uchenna didn't say anything to his father. He knew that if he had anything, it would be accompanied by tears, and he didn't want to be called a weakling. Am I not talking to you? Ejiofor said furiously, this time with a scream that startled Uchenna. You know this boy has been through enough already. Can you stop making him feel worse? He's just a little boy, and everything he's experiencing is because of you. You forced him into accepting to take part in the wrestling festival, Ifeoma said to her husband, and he used his hand to search for the direction of her voice in order to hit her with his walking stick. Unfortunately, she outsmarted him and ran in a different direction. You are lucky I did not find you, he said angrily to his wife. Speaking to Uchenna, he said, as for you, go and bathe. If you like, tell the whole village what you have done. I will just give you up to them, and you won't live to tell the story. He went outside to call Ifeoma and said, where is my breakfast? Bring it out here. Ejiofor sat down outside, leaving Uchenna to contemplate his life. Just then, two elders entered the compound, whispering to each other. When they spotted Ejiofor eagerly waiting for his breakfast, one of the elders said, "Thank the gods he's around. I thought he would go for his normal morning walk, especially today when the festival didn't take place." The other elder shook his head, and this time they were both talking aloud, and Ejiofor heard them clearly. "Who is there?" he asked as they got closer, still talking. "Ejiofor, we know you are blind but not deaf. Greetings to you," they said in unison, with a frown. "The voices sound familiar, but I don't know who is who since I can't see who is talking." He responded with a smile, though the elders were not smiling. "Ejiofor, we came with the bad news," one of the elders said as they sat beside him on the bench. "May the gods forbid such bad news," he said, shrugging his shoulders. "Ifeoma," he called, "bring kola nut for the elders," he said, and they quickly rejected the offer. Uchenna came out of the hut and stood somewhere inside, peeping and listening to what the elders had to say. His heart was racing fast, and he thought about his fate. The elders wouldn't just come without a valid reason. It seemed they had found out something. He stood in a static position, without moving, lost in his thoughts. The past days had drained him mentally, and he had not even noticed how much weight he had lost. He was solely focused on finding a way out of the situation he was in. He couldn't hear what the elders and his fathers were discussing anymore. Seeing their frowning faces, he knew it wasn't good. He had to find a way to overhear their conversation. He rushed to where they were and said, "Papa, you called me." Ejiofor looked at him in disgust and said, "Will you get out of my sight? Did I call you?" The elders intervened, saying, "Leave him alone. He's just a child. Maybe the spirit guard is calling his name or something." "But we also need you here because we went to Ejike's house to find out that the last place he went to, and his wife said he told her he was coming to see your father. Your father said he did not come here. Did you see him here?" They both asked in unison, making Uchenna's heart race again. He couldn't say a word, scared that he might reveal something to the elders. His fear grew as he felt warmth spreading down his legs, and he realized he had wet his pants again. "Uchenna, are you okay?" the elders asked. Uchenna then came to his senses. "No, I didn't see him," he responded fearfully. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the village, the two elders made their way back to the king's palace. They had just visited Ejiofor's house to inquire about Ejike's whereabouts, but something didn't sit right with them. Ichago, the younger of the two elders, furrowed his brow in thought. "I don't think Ejiofor and his family are being completely honest with us," he said, his voice filled with concern. The older elder, nodding in agreement, replied, "I noticed that too. It's as if they are hiding something from us." They walked in silence for a while, mulling over the outcome of their visit. Finally, they reached the palace and were ushered into the king's chamber. "Your Majesty," Ichago began, "we have returned from our visit to Ejiofor's house." The king listened intently as the elders recounted their encounter with Ejiofor and his family. They spoke of the tension in the air, the evasiveness of Ejiofor's answers, and the feeling that something was amiss. When they finished speaking, the king struck his chin thoughtfully. "It seems that Ejiofor and his family may be withholding information from us," he said, his brow furrowed in concern. "What do you suggest we do, Your Majesty?" Ago asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. The king leaned back in his throne, deep in thought. "I believe it is time to consult the chief priest," he said finally. "He may be able to shed some light on Ejike's whereabouts." And so, it was decided. The next morning, the king, accompanied by the two elders, made their way to the sacred grove where the chief priest resided. As they approached the grove, a sense of reverence washed over them. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the sound of chanting filled their ears. The chief priest greeted them warmly, his face filled with smiles. "Welcome, your majesty," he said, bowing low. "What brings you to this sacred grove today?" The king wasted no time in explaining the purpose of their visit. He spoke of Ejike's disappearance and their suspicions regarding Ejiofor and his family. The chief priest listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. After a moment of silence, he spoke, his voice calm yet authoritative. "It is not clear to me what has happened to Ejike," he said slowly, "but I can sense that he is still alive." The king and the elders exchanged glances, surprised by the chief priest's revelation. "What do you mean?" the king asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. The chief priest closed his eyes, his expression solemn. "I sense a faint thread connecting Ejike to this village," he explained. "It is weak, but it is there. He is alive, but his whereabouts remain unknown." The king nodded, absorbing the chief priest's words. "Thank you for your insight, chief priest," he said, bowing respectfully. "We will continue our search for Ejike, and we will not rest until he is found." With renewed determination, the king and the elders made their way back to the palace. The chief priest's words had given them hope, and they were more determined than ever to unravel the mystery of Ejike's disappearance. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Agu made his way through the winding paths of the village towards Ejike's house. He had heard about Ejike's disappearance and wanted to check up on his wife, Nkechi, who he knew must be grieving deeply. As he approached the familiar hut, Agu could hear the sounds of Nkechi's sobs drifting through the air. His heart clenched with sympathy for her as he pushed open the door and stepped inside. Nkechi looked up, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "Agu," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "I didn't expect to see you here." Agu approached her slowly, his expression filled with concern. "I came to check on you, Nkechi," he said gently. "I heard about Ejike's disappearance, and I wanted to make sure you are okay." Nkechi nodded, wiping away her tears with the edge of her wrapper. "Thank you, Agu," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm trying to stay strong, but it's hard not knowing where Ejike is." Agu sat down beside her, offering her a comforting smile. "I understand, Nkechi," he said, "but I have something to tell you that might give you some hope." Nkechi looked up, her eyes brightening with curiosity. "What is it, Agu?" she asked, leaning in closer. Agu took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before speaking. The king and the elders consulted the chief priest. He began, and he told them that he senses Ejike is still alive. Nkechi's eyes widened in surprise, a glimmer of hope shining in them. "Really?" she exclaimed, her voice tinged with disbelief. "That's wonderful news." Agu nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "Yes, it is," he said, "and it means that we shouldn't give up hope. We need to stay strong and keep searching for Ejike until we find him." Nkechi's determination was reignited by Agu's words. "You are right, Agu," she said, her voice filled with determination. "I won't rest until I know what had happened to my husband." As the night wore on, Agu stayed with Nkechi, offering her words of comfort and support, and as they sat together, sharing stories of Ejike and reminiscing about happier times, Nkechi felt a glimmer of hope begin to blossom in her heart. For she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with courage and resilience, fueled by the unwavering belief that she would be reunited with her beloved husband once again. The following day, Nkechi woke up with renewed determination. She had decided to travel to her village to see if she could find any clues about Ejike's whereabouts. With a heavy heart, she bid farewell to her neighbors and set off on the journey. The path to her village was long and winding, but Nkechi pressed on, followed by hope and desperation. Hours passed as she walked, the sun beating down on her weary body. Finally, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, she reached her village. Nkechi searched every corner of the village, asking anyone she met if they had seen or heard anything about Ejike. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't find any trace of her husband. Disheartened and exhausted, she made her way back home, her heart heavy with disappointment. Meanwhile, back at Ejiofor's house, Uchenna was struggling with his own inner turmoil. Ever since Ejike's disappearance, he had been plagued by strange dreams of Ejike attacking him. The guilt weighed heavily on his conscience, gnawing at him day and night. One cool evening, Uchenna mustered up the courage to approach his father, Ejiofor, who was sitting outside their hut, enjoying the fresh air. "Nani," he began, his voice trembling with emotion, "I have decided to go to the palace and confess my offense. The guilt is killing me every day." Ejiofor's eyes narrowed with anger as he turned to face his son. "Will you shut up, you coward?" he bellowed, his voice echoing through the evening air. "You don't know what you are saying. That is why I have continually said you are not my son. I am a lion, so you should also be one." Uchenna's heart sank at his father's harsh words. He knew that Ejiofor would never understand the torment he was going through. But deep down, he knew that he couldn't continue living with the guilt of his actions weighing him down. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the village, Ifeoma heard Ejiofor's loud voice from outside their hut. Alarmed, she rushed out to find out what was happening, her heart pounding with anxiety. "Nani, what is it again?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "Ask your son," Ejiofor replied harshly, his brow furrowed with anger. Ifeoma turned to Uchenna, her eyes searching his troubled expression. "Uche, what is the problem again?" she inquired gently. "Mama, I'm dying slowly of torment," Uchenna confessed, his voice trembling with emotion. "Of what I did to Ejike, I want to go and confess to the king instead of dying slowly like this." Hot tears streamed down Ifeoma's cheeks as she listened to her son's heartbreaking confession. "Mwam, Biko," she pleaded, her voice choked with emotion. "I know what you are going through. Please don't go. You know you are my only child. If they stone you to death, then I will die with you. Please, be strong as your father has said." More tears poured out of Ifeoma's eyes as she embraced her son tightly, her heart aching with love and fear. She couldn't bear the thought of losing him, especially not in such a cruel and senseless manner. Uchenna's heart swelled with love and gratitude for his mother as he felt her warm embrace. He knew that he couldn't bear to see her suffer, but the guilt of his actions weighed heavily on his conscience. As the evening wore on, Uchenna and Ifeoma sat together outside their hut, lost in thought. The cool breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of blooming flowers. But despite the peacefulness of the evening, a heavy cloud of uncertainty hung over their heads. Uchenna knew that he couldn't continue living with guilt of his actions eating away at him. He needed to find a way to make amends for what he had done, even if it meant facing the consequences head-on. But deep down, Ifeoma couldn't bear the thought of losing her son. She prayed silently to the gods, begging for strength and guidance to help her and the family through this difficult time. The next morning, against the advice of his parents, Uchenna gathered his courage and made his way to the palace of the king. As he approached the grand entrance, his heart raced with nervousness, but he knew he had to do what was right. Upon his arrival, Uchenna bowed respectfully before the king, his head bowed low in reverence. The king, sensing Uchenna's tension, furrowed his brow in concern. "Rise, young man," he commanded gently. "What troubles you?" But Uchenna remained kneeling, unable to meet the king's gaze. With a heavy heart, he began to recount the events of that fateful day, When Ejike had come to their house and the terrible actions that had followed, as Uchenna spoke, the king's eyes widened in shock. Unable to believe the words that were coming out of the young man's mouth, he called for the palace guards to gather the elders and summon Ejiofor and his wife to the palace immediately. When Ejiofor and Ifeoma arrived at the palace, they were taken aback to see their son standing before the king. They exchanged worried glances, knowing that something serious must have happened for Uchenna to be summoned to the palace. Once everyone was seated, the king turned to Uchenna and urged him to repeat what he had told him earlier. With a heavy heart, Uchenna recounted the events of that dreadful day, sparing no details. As Uchenna's words echoed through the throne room, the elders exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to react to such shocking revelations. They had known Ejiofor for many years and had never suspected him of such a heinous crime. Ejiofor and Ifeoma watched in horror as their son confessed to his involvement in Ejike's disappearance. They couldn't believe what they were hearing, their minds reeling with disbelief and despair. The king's expression darkened as he listened to Uchenna's confession. "This is a grave accusation, young man," he said sternly. "We will need to investigate this matter thoroughly." With a heavy heart, Uchenna bowed his head in shame, knowing that he had betrayed his family and brought shame upon his name. But deep down, he also felt a sense of relief for finally speaking the truth and seeking justice for Ejike. As the evening of the appointed day arrived, the tension in the village hung thick in the air. The elders had come to the conclusion that Uchenna must face the traditional punishment of stoning to death for his confessed crime. The news spread quickly throughout the village, and soon everyone gathered in the village square to witness the sentencing. Ifeoma stood among the crowd, her heart heavy with grief and despair. She couldn't bear the thought of losing her son, but she knew that tradition must prevail. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she pleaded with the villagers to spare Uchenna's life, but her cries fell on deaf ears. Meanwhile, Ejiofor sat in silence, his heart weighed down by sorrow and bitterness. Despite his blindness, he could sense the anguish in his wife's voice and the turmoil in his son's heart. He felt helpless, knowing that there was nothing he could do to save his only child from his fate. As the guards approached to arrest Uchenna, the village youth gathered around, their faces stern and determined. They knew that they must uphold the traditions of their ancestors, no matter how difficult it may be. With heavy hearts, the guards seized Uchenna and began to lead him towards the center of the village square, where the sentence would be carried out. Ifeoma cried out in despair, her pleas echoing through the crowd, but it was too late. The wheels of justice had been set in motion, and nothing could stop them now. But just as the first stone was about to be thrown, a miraculous sight unfolded before the eyes of the villagers. From the nearby bushes emerged Ejike, the man who had been missing for so long. The crowd was in astonishment, their attention now fully focused on Ejike's unexpected return. Ejike approached the village square, his eyes filled with determination and resolve. He pleaded with the villagers to spare Uchenna's life, recounting the events that had transpired since that fateful day when Uchenna had stabbed him. He had been thrown into the farmland. "I was left for dead," Ejike explained, his voice trembling with emotion. "But a kind-hearted hunter from the neighboring village found me and nursed me back to health. I was unconscious for weeks before I finally regained consciousness." Ifeoma rushed to her son's side, tears of relief streaming down her face. She hugged him tightly, grateful beyond words that he had been spared from such a cruel fate. Uchenna clung to his mother, his heart overflowing with gratitude for Ejike's timely intervention. And as the villagers gathered in the fading light of the evening, they rejoiced in Ejike's miraculous return, grateful for the second chance that had been given to him. As the sun began to set on the village casting golden hues across the landscape. A sense of peace descended upon the people. The events of the past days had left their mark, but now, with Ejike's return and the truth revealed, there was a newfound sense of hope and reconciliation in the air. Ejike stood before the villagers, his gaze steady and his voice firm. He knew that he had to set things right, to make amends for the role he had played in the tragedy that had befallen the village. "I must confess," Ejike began, his words ringing out clear and true. "It was I who instigated Uchenna to commit the offense. I was blinded by my own anger and resentment, and in my pride, I created the monster that nearly ended me. I have learned the hard way that no man is a coward." Ejike continued, his voice tinged with remorse. "We all are capable of great deeds, both good and bad, but it is how we choose to act in the face of adversity that defines us." With these words, Ejike extended his hands towards Uchenna, a gesture of peace and reconciliation. Uchenna hesitated for a moment, his heart heavy with emotion. But then, with a sense of resolve, he reached out and shook Ejike's hand. The villagers watched in awe as the two men stood together, united in their shared humanity and their desire to move forward. It was a powerful moment, a testament to the strength of forgiveness and the healing power of redemption. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the village, the people gathered together in a circle, joining hands in a gesture of solidarity and unity. For in that moment, they knew that they had emerged from darkness into the light, stronger and more resilient than ever before. And so, with hearts full of hope and gratitude, the villagers bid farewell to the trials and tribulations of the past, embracing the promise of a brighter future. And as they looked towards the horizon, where the first stars were beginning to twinkle in the evening sky, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as one united community. And with that, the story of the monster you made came to an end, leaving behind a legacy of courage, compassion, and the enduring power of forgiveness. The most important lesson of the story is about forgiveness and redemption. Through the trials and tribulation faced by the characters, we learn that mistakes and wrongdoings are inevitable parts of lives. But what truly matters is how we choose to respond to them. Both Ejike and Uchenna grapple with guilt and remorse for their actions, but ultimately, they found solace and healing in forgiveness. By extending a hand of reconciliation and choosing to let go of the past grievances, they not only find peace within themselves, but also foster a sense of unity and understanding within their community. This story reminds us that no matter how dear the circumstances may seem, there is always hope for redemption and a chance to make amends for our mistakes. And with that, my dear friends, our story comes to a close. But remember, the magic of storytelling lives on, waiting to whisk us away on new adventures, where the wonders of imagination know no bounds. Goodbye for now, and may your dreams be filled with joy, wonder, and endless possibility. Thank you so much for watching. Please kindly comment, share, like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting stories.